We cordially welcome our keynote speakers, Vincent, Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist for Google, Anirudh, Chair, United Nations Internet Governance Forum, Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and T. Santosh, Scientist Mighty, and in welcoming our other expert speakers, Dr. Olivia, Dr. Govind, Mr. Deepak Maheshwari, Mr. Rajneesh Singh, Mr. Samiran, Mr. Srinivas Chendi, Ms. Joyce Chen, Ms. Sheetal Kumar, Dr. Gulshan Roy, Ms. Napinai, Ms. Madsi Kedia, Mr. Rakesh Maheshwari, Ms. Shraddha Hegde, Mr. Abhijan, Mr. Osama, Ms. Gayatri, Mr. Siddharth, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Glenn, who will be joining us in the next couple of days. I also take immense pleasure in welcoming our fellows and all the sponsors for the event. I need to place on record a special welcome note to the inSIG 2021 Core Committee, Steering Committee, Fellowship Committee, and all volunteers for their devotion, vision, courage, passion, and constant effort to make this event happen. As you can see, our agenda of the meeting is impressively rich, and I'm looking forward to very fruitful discussions during these 3 days. I would wish to encourage all participants to actively engage in our discussions and debates of the coming days, to share their experience and not to hesitate, ask questions to our expert speakers and among yourself in order to make this a truly interactive and lively event. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Sudha. Well, as you've already seen, the next session is by none other than Vince Cerf, the father of the internet, currently working as the Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it at this time zone, so he has sent across a video message. Over to you, Anand, to present the video.
Hello, my name is Vince Cerf. I'm Vice President and Chief Internet Evangelist at Google, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the Indian School of Internet Governance, thanks to Satish Babu and his colleagues. I wish I could be there with you, but unfortunately my calendar didn't cooperate, so you end up with virtual event. The internet governance is a very complex topic, and of course it's been the subject of discussion and debate ever since the internet was created, way back in 1973 when the early work was being done, and even before that with the ARPANET predecessor. Questions about how one would operate such a system, particularly one which involved multiple networks, each operated under potentially different jurisdictions with different business models, with different technical conditions, different use patterns. And of course, over time, as the internet has evolved, applications have evolved to go along with it, especially as increased capacity has become available. So whereas back in the days when the internet was first turned on in January of 1983, we wouldn't be doing anything like the video streaming that we're doing today, simply because the capacity of the network wasn't adequate for that. So over time, as the capacities go up, new applications are feasible and become increasingly of interest. This, of course, has contributed to some of the challenges that we face in internet governance, not least of which is the use of the internet for social networking. This is not new. I mean, it should be understood that variations on social networking have been part of the internet and even the predecessor ARPANET environment, literally for the past 50 years. By way of example, one of the first distribution lists that came up on the ARPANET as part of the email development were two networks or two distribution lists, one of which was Sci-Fi Lovers, which is a group of people debating over who were the best science fiction authors. And the other one was Yum Yum, which is a restaurant review list. And we could see very quickly that email in this form of distribution lists had a clear social component to it. And of course, over time, as the internet's capacities have changed and increased, the kinds of social networking that were possible increased or changed along with it. So as an example, YouTube comes along and video turns out to be a means of expression which is readily shared and distributed through the network, partly thanks to increased bandwidth and partly thanks to content distribution networks which were developed in order to reduce the load on the core of the internet so that a video only had to traverse the core once to the various content distribution centers and then copied locally to the various subscribers who wanted to watch a particular video. So I would say that we are faced on a regular basis with new adaptations of the internet to new kinds of applications, which introduce their own set of potential debatable items in governance. So today, of course, the topic on many tongues is the abuse of social networking, the feedback loops that seem to invite increasingly extreme content in order to get attraction, to get likes, or get views, which is not necessarily in the best interest of anyone who is using these systems. So figuring out how to adapt the applications and the offerings to reduce the level of abusive behaviors or extreme behaviors or the distribution of misinformation and disinformation, deliberate distribution, deliberate attempts to interfere with or to influence thinking with regard to social networks, but which may spill over, for example, into the political world. We have ample evidence of the use of social networking in order to influence voter thinking, certainly here in the US and in other parts of the world, in Europe and elsewhere. So the question is, what kind of governance practices should we be debating and considering? If we want to protect citizens from harm, there are a variety of harms that we have to worry about. Malware, for example, denial of service attacks, influence peddling, bullying behaviors, things that, or other kinds of behaviors that have an impact on people's well-being are all sources of real concern. And governments are already attending to this by trying to create regulatory frameworks that will provide incentives to the suppliers of services to do what they can to reduce the level of hazard that users might experience or business customers might experience. This leads to sometimes impossible demands, especially in the context of the scaled up nature of the internet. Just a statistical example, it's estimated that somewhere between 400 and 500 hours of video are uploaded into YouTube per minute. So our ability to examine all of that manually is very, very limited. The number of people that would be necessary to do that is excessive. And so people turn to one of the tools that has allowed us to augment our human capabilities, machine learning, artificial intelligence, which can be replicated on tens of thousands of computers in order to accomplish a particular objective. But we also know that these techniques are, as powerful as they are, also have weaknesses where occasionally they will make bad decisions about the quality of a particular piece of information or a video or a website or something like that. So we can't rely exclusively on these automated tools, at least not as I see it. There's another countervailing question here, and that's how to induce the general public to think more carefully and more critically about what they're seeing and hearing. This takes work, and not everyone is willing to put the effort into it. But it seems to me that the wetware up here is a very important tool that needs to be prepared and trained to distinguish good quality information from bad quality information. The way we do that is to experience both and to have discussions about what constitutes and what indicates good quality. What sources are there? Where did the information come from? Is there corroborating evidence for assertions that are being made from sources that you trust? So this is an important skill that needs to be taught, I think, early on in school as young people become exposed to the internet environment. And before they get too exposed to it, you want them to have tools in their hands to protect themselves from poor quality information. This also is an important element of safety for people, especially if the information has to do with healthcare, for example, or the advisability of vaccinations and things of that kind. Poor quality information can lead to really bad outcomes. Governments are very worried about this, understandably, and so they're asking questions: how do we protect our population from harmful behaviors, including the distribution of malware, ransomware, denial of service attacks, invasion and pollution of databases, theft of identity. There's quite a long list of things that people can do on the net. They can also do some of these things offline. Fraud, for example, works in many different conditions, but fraud on the internet is also a challenge that has to be met. I can only say that many organizations around the world, other internet governance schools such as yours, the Internet Governance Forum, the G7, the G20, the group of government experts. I mean, there's OECD and its Information Technology Advisory Committee. There's a very long list of people, to say nothing of researchers, for example, that are trying to look for mechanisms that would allow better filtering of content and protection of users from harmful behaviors. Is still a very broad topic with many, many interested parties. Not as much progress as I would have liked, but nonetheless a clear focus of attention, something which you too have an opportunity to contribute to. So I sincerely hope that as you deliberate on these topics, that you will discover important insights to share with the rest of us, so that we can increasingly make the internet a safer place for everyone. Really appreciate your listening, and I look forward to seeing you on the net.
Thank you so much, Vincent and Anand, for smoothly handling that.